Mr. Donald Forrester. I was just gonna make a joke, actually gonna say that the only thing that's missing for us right now is a plate of pancakes, right?
Yes,
Is
absolutely. We have shared that experience many times.
I was gonna say, isn't that a common dish? I think it is. Every single time we've met, I could be misremembering, but I'm almost positive it's always been pancakes involved, maybe some form of sandwich, maybe not, but I trying to remember. I think it's always been pancakes.
And, well, hey, that works for me. If hot coffee, I mean, life is good.
It truly is. I'm glad we're able to connect. Like I mentioned to you earlier, I wanted to, share the space with you as a way to like relive the moment that you and I were able to create for each other at Magnolia. I think it was 20, no, not even 24 hours before I left. I think it was hours before I
It was
left,
hours
right?
before you left. Me, well, you had sent me an invitation, and out of sight, out of mind. And by the time I
Mm,
realized I had not responded, I had missed the window of opportunity. And you assured me that we would meet before you left town.
yes, and I fulfilled that
True to
promise.
word, you were packed and ready to go.
I remember that. It was so funny. I had the rental car ready to go, and I met you in the morning. We had breakfast together, and I was able to gift you your book, which I guess you were able to open up on the way. Because I remember you had called me, and I was trying to figure out, did you call me when you got in the car or when you got home?
Probably when I got in the car, in the restaurant. You had handed me the book. I didn't realize that there were pictures on the face of the book.
Mm,
And when I got out into the light, uh, I'm going to take my hearing aids out
of course.
because now they're talking to me. Someone said, I didn't get that. Would you say that again? I have no idea who I'm having this conversation with. Uh, the last people I called was my doctor's office, so they may still be online. You know,
Hey, if they
they're
want to
doing well.
join, if they want to join the podcast, that's perfectly fine.
Okay. But
But
no,
you
I got
you
in the car and opened the book up, and I was just blown away. Very personalized. I thought, how did he come up with all this stuff?
hmm Well,
And I
it's
still
probably
can't.
harder to it's probably harder to grasp the concept unless you're able to fully feel it yourself, right? And that's kind of like what I started to realize is that even in explaining this to other people, you can grasp the concept of yes, it's a book, it has messages, you can kind of picture, it might have pictures of you, but I think it's a completely different feeling when you actually receive it yourself, about yourself, from the people closest to you. And in your case, I mean, we were able to get quite a few people. Coroni played a massive role in helping put this together. We got your family members. I think it was a lot of people from your church
A
community as
lot of
well,
people
right?
from the legal families.
Yeah.
Uh,
So that was
I
probably
was,
it was probably quite a bit to receive that all in one day.
well, in fact, I read through the book this morning and got teary-eyed again. I mean, the things people chronicled and shared about the impact, uh, I still can't quite wrap my head around it. I mean, I'm just plain old ordinary Don who, just has the privilege of having friends.
hmm
Nothing
Now,
unique, nothing special, but somehow people are graciously give me a lot more credit than credit's due, and you did as well.
hmm well, you deserve it. You made a big impact in my life, and obviously, as you could see, you made a big impact in others. I'm curious, did you ever know the type of impact you had made in their lives prior to reading anything that you had in the book?
Well, I will say I know that I'm loved. Okay, that's just kind of a given, but the why I'm loved is kind of ill defined. Uh, some of the things people chronicled, I had no idea the impact um, that our relationship had resulted in.
hmm
one person mentioned, in the League of Families, I've done 2 or 3 grief workshops on ambiguous grief. And of course, the common denominator, everybody that's a part of that group have lost someone. And, nothing I wrote about grief or have written about grief is profound at all. I just simply wrote down what my experience had been. But my experience mirrors their experience, and people find that helpful.
Mm-hmm. And you shared that with me. I remember when you and I had that last breakfast, or not, let me rephrase that, not last breakfast, one of many more breakfasts to have. You
Okay.
shared that with me, kind of your whole experience going through it, and then the support you were able to get from all the different people in encouraging you and giving you that foundation. I just found really fascinating how you've been able to grow through that journey despite
Well,
everything
it's
that
been
had
a
happened.
long haul. I mean, that's been well over 50 years since I began that pilgrimage, but in many respects, it seems like yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, do you express the same level of gratitude to other people? Do you
I
express to them the
try to,
impact they
but
have?
truthfully, you know, have you read the Book of Questions?
I have not.
Book of Questions is an interesting book.
Mm-hmm.
There's no theme to it. It's just random questions that give you pause to think. For example, if you just learned from the hospital that they had made a mistake and the 2-year-old that you treasure and love is not really your child, would you want to take action to have your biological child returned and correct the error?
Wow.
I mean, that's a thoughtful question. Uh, there's another question. If you were to die unexpectedly today
Mm-hmm.
without having an opportunity to contact anyone, what would you most regret not having shared with someone? And then the next question is, why haven't you shared it?
Mm-hmm.
And memories worth remembering remind me of that last question.
Mm-hmm.
Because, all of us probably have multiple things that, you know, if we knew it was our final opportunity to communicate, we would communicate, but we get so busy taking care of the unimportant that we forget the important.
Mm. That's so true. And I'm thinking about my own day and the previous days and just all the different things that occupy my time, my schedule, all choice, right?
Right.
All choices that I'm making in being able to engage in those things. But really, I think at the end of the day, what you just mentioned is so profound. Why haven't I said those things? I'll say for me, and I don't know what it is for you, but for me, some of the things I would say, I love you. I think that's one of the things that I haven't said enough times, and solely because my journey with that has been drastically different. I think
Right.
I'm just coming to terms to understanding what it actually means to say to someone, I love you, other than just a set of words, but actually a feeling and experience that I can almost pass on to the other person while sharing that. So that's one of the things that I know for a fact I would possibly have as a regret if I were to die today.
Right. Well, interestingly, I know so many people in the midst of adulthood who never
Mm.
heard a parent say, I love you.
Mm-hmm.
And, I had the good fortune of living in a very different kind of setting. So that concept, apart from my work in child welfare, which gave me a whole new perception of families, um, it's tough, but just to carve out the time to let people know you've made a difference in my life. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even the things that my 2 children wrote, I mean,
Mm.
fill my eyes with tears. Things that, one of the things years and years ago when my daughter was about 2, we didn't have where we lived. We didn't have trash pickup. So every Saturday I took our trash to the city place to take it. And so she started going with me at the age of 2, and then we would go to Dairy Queen and have a blizzard. And, she has fond memories of the times we shared together doing that. And that doesn't seem that long ago, but it's been 40 years.
Mm. I wonder if she has any memories of what you experienced this morning. Has she been able
Picking
to
up
be a part of
trash,
that?
hadn't even connected those dots. No, I have never run down the street or across the street in the rain and cold wind picking up trash. I'm thinking, and I'm holding this stuff, and I'm thinking, this is trash I'm holding close.
It's funny how life sometimes, not even sometimes, all the time, I feel like, has all these different things in plan for us, right?
But
We think the day is going to go according to this plan and this way, and then all of a sudden, just a slight change in events changes the entire schedule, the circumstances, and it's just fascinating. It's fascinating to me to think about those things and also put in perspective, well, what can I really control? Or what do I believe I control at the end of the day? Right?
well, and I learned a long time ago, I have no control over anything that ultimately matters. Just giving you that as a given. I will no regrets associated with this book is I have not yet reached out to everybody who contributed. I don't
Mm.
know where the time goes. I wanted to do a handwritten note. Well, they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I mean, I have benefited greatly from
Mm.
everything written in this book. And I owe it to the people who wrote those things to let them know.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
before November is over, I'm not going to say October, but before November is over, I will reach out to them, probably with a phone call, because that gives you more opportunities to interact. But anyway, I
Less
need to
stress.
let people know how meaningful the
Mhm.
impact.
Mhm. What was it like reading it from your kids? Because I've heard from some people that I've gifted this to, they said that reading that from their kids was the most impactful because so many times the kid and parent relationship, you don't get to express these things.
I had the good fortune of always having a really good rapport with my kids. So the fact that my son wants to be the kind of dad that he perceives I was. I mean, he is the world's best dad. I mean, he goes nonstop every free moment he's got doing something with his kids. If he's attempting to emulate what he experienced with me, he has gone way past anything I was ever capable of doing. And I'm really, really proud of him.
Mm.
My daughter and I have always been close. I mean, she's got my personality, so we get into trouble together. What can I say?
Hey, it happens in every family, I bet.
Exactly. You know,
I never asked you this, and I'm curious to learn from you about this perspective, your parents. Because I know you and I have connected numerous times by now and spoken probably on every subject on the face of the earth. But I think there is one that I have actually not asked you about, and it's your parents.
okay.
What was your upbringing like? Did you because did you grow up in Texas as well, or
I
no?
did grow up in Texas. I'm a baby boomer,
Okay.
and my mom didn't work. My dad was a blue collar laborer. He worked hard, and his family was his priority. But I mean, he worked all the time, or much of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Often off on weekends, but he was very frugal. His favorite question is, "How much does it cost?" And and the other thing, if ever I'm asking permission to do something, and my
Mm.
mom says you need to ask your dad, to me that was the equivalent of hearing a no.
Mm.
Now that was true of my childhood years. when I had kids and he became a grandfather, he became a very different person. I thought, where did this guy come from? I mean, he was very involved with his grandkids, but of course, he had time as a retiree that he didn't have when he was earning a living.
Mhm.
My mom was one of those people that just walks into a room and brings the room to life. I mean, she was a kid magnet.
Mhm.
She was an advocate for kids, and in fact,
And
well, I'll give an example. At some point, because I bought a Cadillac back in my mid-30s, and I called her and told her, and she said, "That really concerns me. Your son doesn't even have a television in his room." I'm thinking, I never had a television in my room. But I mean, her automatic default was, what are kids doing without?
mhm. Well, hence probably the reason why you're in the profession that you've been, right?
Well, I guess that's true.
Have you
Uh,
done child welfare most of your life?
I've always been peripherally in child welfare work. I started as a child protective services worker at the age of 23,
Oh, wow.
1970. If you do the math, that was a long time. Um, and then I moved, I did foster care, adoption, moved into residential child care licensing, which was another kind of protective services work, and
Mhm.
did that for about 17 years. And then had a midlife crisis and wanted hands-on. I wanted to run a program, and
Mm.
really had a wonderful opportunity of doing that. When I retired 7 years ago from full-time work, it was a tough decision, but my commute to work, getting home took me 2.5 hours. It was a 50-mile commute. At some point, you're not sure that's a good use of time. And I had
Mhm.
an opportunity to move into a part-time work with a professional organization of children's homes and residential schools. So I chose to do that, and now I primarily work from home and travel some.
Mm.
But I'm pretty people needy, so I miss being in contact with people every day.
Yeah, you sure are. In a good way. I really
Very
mean
good.
that in a good
Yeah.
way. Yeah. I'm trying to remember when you and I connected at that conference in Austin. Were you a part of that organization or were you doing something that was separate? Because
Well,
for
I had done a workshop on self care. It was
okay.
the ethics of self care. But I was working with Children at Heart Ministries at the time. And in that role, I worked with 4 other uh, agencies that were affiliated with Children at Heart Ministries. There was Texas Baptist Children's Homes,
Hmm.
Starry, there was Gracewood, and there was Miracle Farm. So I had 4 venues I served as president of, in addition to being vice president of program and services for Children Heart Ministry. So I was still in those roles when we first met,
Okay.
which is
Because I
why I
was
said, yeah, I can connect you to agencies that care for kids and older foster kids that could
mm-hmm.
benefit visiting with you.
Mm-hmm. Because I remember when you and I connected, and I was trying to actually remember how that happened. I know we were at the same event. I don't remember if I was a part of your workshop or you were a part of my workshop. Do you remember that part?
I attended your workshop.
Oh, that's how it was. Okay.
Yeah.
That's how it was.
And the workshop was not heavily attended, and it was at the end of the day, so we had time just to visit when it was over.
Yes, I do remember that now. Okay. Because I was trying to piece the pieces together, like how did I actually meet Don? Because I remember the event, I remember the place, I remember the organization that put it all together, but I couldn't remember which room, how it all happened. But now that makes sense.
Right. And so
I think
you expressed to me, you were interested in helping children from foster care and adoption craft their
yes,
story and look at their story
yes.
perhaps differently. And I said, hey, I've been in this business a long time. I know people who can provide you access to kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I remember that. Well, look at the story that we've crafted from that point on, right?
Hey, it just gets better and better. You know,
I'm really glad. I'm so glad that we were able to connect at the event. I'm so glad that we've been able to see each other in person multiple times. And like I mentioned to you, I'll also be in Austin in December. So I'll definitely be making it out to your neck of the woods because now that I'm thinking
wonderful.
about it, I don't think I've ever been to where you're
Hey,
at.
it's not that far southwest of Austin, but it's a very different world.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved into our home. It's almost been 5 months now, which is hard to believe. It seems like yesterday. And we've gone 2.5 months of water restrictions. We have no lawn. I mean, it looks like we're raising weeds, and we do a really good job of it.
Now, are you missing that part? Are you missing the whole mowing the lawn part? Or not exactly?
No, actually, probably a decade before we moved from our last home, I had my yard taken care of because I worked all the time, or I was sitting in
Mm.
traffic getting to and from work. And I used to love to do yard work. I mean, it's one of the things you could do and see that you made a difference when you're working with children and families from hard places. How do you measure that you've made a
Mm-hmm.
difference? So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, lawn care was one way to do that, but I tired of it, and I don't own a lawnmower. I don't plan to own a lawn.
Well, the thing with kids in families, at least that I've seen from my experience, is that I think you're spot on. Being able to see the impact and the difference, it can become challenging just because they transition from or can transition into so many homes, right? So to a
Right,
certain point, just keeping track of, well, where is this child? What age are they? What are they doing? And that's why I think for me, it really became important to be able to take a step back and reflect and say, okay, who are all the people who have made a difference in my life? And how can I express my gratitude to them? Because I think for so many years, and I don't know if you've also learned this throughout your own journey, but things like that just go unrecognized, unnoticed, probably undervalued, right? Because
right.
I think they just become accepted like, well, you and I, we know we make a difference in each other's lives, but how often did we actually take a step back and say, hey, Don, if this wasn't for you doing X, Y, and Z, I would not be the person that I am today.
Well, I will tell you, I have pastored a little church for over 40 years, the one out here in west of Dripping Springs. I even did that when I lived in Midland and commuted 325 miles every week one way. Um,
Really?
it was wonderful therapy, but I've done a lot of funerals, and I always ask families, even if I've known the person really well, what do you value most about your loved one? What do you value
Mm,
most about your dad or your mom? And because I've wanted to ensure that I identify a person's strength, if we're going to celebrate their life. But what has puzzled me often is some people say, I really can't think of anything.
hmm
And that always hurts my heart because, when you've got an important role in a person's life and they can't, in reflecting on you, come up with anything they valued, um, that's a sad indictment about what their experience has been.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think they can't come up with anything?
My best guess is they never felt valued and loved, and
Mm,
consequently, they missed what the person had to offer.
hmm.
I've talked with people who, in the midst of adulthood and in the midst of love, after a parent was gone, would have a really difficult time dealing with their death.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, a friend of mine whose mother's favorite time of the year was Christmas reached out to me and she said, Christmas has become really tough for me because I hate it now. And I know my mom loved it. And she said, I know that that your brother's plane went down in the Christmas bombing range and you seem to have worked through all that. How do I get past this? And I said, well, and I gave it some thought. I said, the first thing I would do is simply write down everything you valued about your mother. Give some time. What were her strengths? What did you most value? I said, and then I would make a separate list of all the ways you were hurt by your mother. The unkind things she said, or the things that got communicated. Make a list. And don't feel guilty about it because it's part of your perception. Write it all down. And then the third list, write down everything you regret having done to your mom. The kinds of things you did that brought hurt and pain to her. And she went through that extra. Anyway, I said, and then after you've carefully evaluated 3 lists, shred 2 of them and keep 1.
That's really interesting. And the one you keep is obviously your choice.
The thing
right?
that it's their choice, but 99% of the time, people are going to choose the things they value most and let go of all the other stuff. And I think there's value in writing it down. I process life by writing it down. That's one of the reasons I blog often. I started out blogging for 1 week, and at the end of the week, I couldn't stop writing. Because when you take the time to reflect on what's just happened, it makes it more personal or more real, or you just have a different kind of awareness of what's taking place.
Well, I also think going back to your list analogy, I really love that concept and practice, and I especially like the very last part, because I think in my experience, it's the last list that's been the most challenging, right?
Right.
Because that's when you're forced to take accountability over the fact that, okay, here are all the things that I think this person did wrong, but how did I contribute to those things?
Right.
What was my role in all of that? And that was the most challenging for me, in being able to accept that and understand that, hey, relationships are rarely a one-way street. It's always a two-way street.
Always.
There's the person and there's you.
There are no perfect children.
There are no perfect friendships. I think there's a lot of beauty in contrast. I think there's a friend of mine, she shared this with me the other day. We were talking about friendships and the role that people play in their lives. And she had made a point. She said that there's a lot of value in contrast in life. And I think sometimes contrast is perceived, at least I used to perceive it, as something to get rid of, right? Something to push away.
Right.
When really, like, contrast has a lot of beauty because it gives the opportunity to reflect, to pause, to think, to pick and choose, to possibly make a different decision, to then influence the outcome for a completely different journey.
It's true.
So,
and one of the things I will tell you in looking through the book, some of the things people highlighted was my simply being there when they were in a time of difficulty.
Yeah.
And all of us have gone to times of difficulty, and it's those people that stand close and are supportive that you come to have a different kind of relationship connection with.
Is the blog, you mentioned you started the blog, and I love reading the blog, and I feel like I'm somehow a part of Don at this point,
Right.
having learned so much about your life and the different things you see.
The thing of it is, my stories remind people of their stories.
Yes.
And that gives a different kind of connection, because you feel like my experience mirrors your experience, and so we share that kind of bond.
Is there a place where the blog is hosted, or is it primarily through Facebook?
No, I've got 2 websites. I started on Weebly, and I still post everything on Weebly, going back to April of 2014. And my granddaughter at the age of 11 set up that website for me. I'll get that to you. It's also on WordPress.
Mm-hmm.
And the people
Wow,
on
you've been doing that since 2014.
yeah.
That is impressive.
And for at least 7 or 8 years, I only missed 3 days, and that's when I had eye surgery. Then I gave myself and there were people, most of what I write is nonsense. That's my spiritual gift. I can make people laugh. If I ever write anything meaningful or that you want to read again, it didn't come from me. I just had the privilege of writing it down. But I started the blog. We were in North Carolina keeping our grandchildren at Camp Lejeune while my son and daughter were away for a week. And so we put the kids in school, and I thought, well, because we've been there many times, and Camp Lejeune is beautiful, and there are hike and bike trails. So we were going to go for a 5-mile walk, but I was not going to communicate that because the answer would have been absolutely not. And so we start walking. We didn't go far, and she said, "You said it would be shady out here. It's hot, And we met someone shortly after we started walking, and we exchanged just hellos. And she, "Are you Craig's dad? You sound just like him." Anyway, we got lost. The road was under construction, the trails had changed, and I got us lost. And finally, Treva says, "I'm going to pass out. It is so hot." And I'm thinking, and I'm hearing that, but I'm thinking, please God, let her. At least it'll be quiet. Humorous things to say. Anyway, as we're making our way back, the lady we had met earlier drove by and saw us, turned around, and she said, "Are y'all still out walking?" And she said, "You're not going to get back. The bus it's early release day. The bus will be there at 2. Y'all get in the car." And at some point, Treva had said, it demanded, "Get your phone out and see how far we are from the house." We were 5.2 miles from the house at
That's
that
a
point.
hike back.
So anyway, I said, "If you'll take her, you may save my marriage." So I blogged the next day on Facebook. I'd never written anything on Facebook before. And I was shocked at the responses. And so I thought, well, I'll just chronicle for a week. And whatever the daily adventure is, I'll write down something about it. And I couldn't stop writing at the end of the week.
Well, now I think you've gotten close to probably doing almost one every day, which is
Yeah,
really impressive.
I average. Well, I took a 6-month sabbatical at some point because I've got thousands of pages I've written. And I thought I'll just weave these into a book or 2 or 3. And I wasn't disciplined enough to do that. Plus, I was missing processing information by writing it down. So I have to do that. It's really more like a journal because everything I write about is something that happened or something that came to mind in the pursuit of just free thought.
Well, I'm sure tomorrow's story is probably going to include somehow going out in the morning, picking up the trash, because it sounded like that was an experience that.
Well, read my blog today. It will explain my black fingers. I shut my hand in the door
Ow.
on Saturday, and it still really, really hurts. So I didn't think it was worthy of going to the emergency room, but I am going to drop by my doctor's office today, and he'll probably have
Get
x-rays.
something for it. Yeah. What did you say the name of the blog was, or at least the website where people could find it?
Well, I've got 2 websites. The first one is Weebly. It's Carpe Diem. I'll have to look it up and get it to you. The other one is through WordPress, and you can subscribe, and my blog winds up in your inbox every day. And then I do them all on Facebook, but they go back to April of 2014.
That's amazing.